I'm hello everybody. Claire, do you want to just request to speak for me? I just had to run up and down the stairs because I realised I was going to be out of charge. So I need to catch my breath before we start. Right, let's just check, Gaurav, that you can actually talk to me. Do you want to just unmute yourself and say hello?
Hi, Elizabeth. And can I just say that was my big worry, so I charged my phone this afternoon.
Well, I just suddenly realised that I have my laptop open so that I can see the questions and see who I need to invite on, and then all of a sudden I realised, oh no, it's going to run out before I finish. So yeah, we're all sorted, which is good. And Claire, can I just ask you to say hello and see if you can talk to me?
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello there. How are you? You
Yeah.
had a good week?
Yeah, good. Busy, and I've just been having some major technical issues, but yeah, I'm all sorted now.
We're all there. That's
Yeah, just about.
It's been one of those days, I think. All right. So anybody that's listening at the minute, we start this at 7:00. So there's a couple of minutes to go before we crack on. I'm hoping that my co-hosts Ruth and Sabrina will turn up. See, my brain's not with it. But it looks like we're quite quiet at the moment, so I will see if I can find them. See if I can invite. No, can't. I have to wait till they come on. All right. So just so that you know, what we do is hello Ruth, that's good. Hi there, Ruth. I'm going to try and put you as co-host. Send co-host. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to be a co-host. And Sabrina's here. That's good. We're doing well this evening. Sabrina, do you want to? So yeah, let me say hello to Ruth first. Hi, Ruth. How are you doing?
How are you?
Good. I'm getting there. This is when this is the time that my watch tells me that I'm not doing any exercise and my heart beats up to 150 beats a minute. once I'm sorted, I'm good. Sabrina, do you want to come on and request to speak, and then I will invite you to be co-host as well, so I have a backup. All right. So while I'm waiting for Sabrina to request to speak, it's just to say that what I'll do is I'll do a brief introduction. I will have us sorted so that I'll invite you one at a time to say something. If one or other of us are speaking and you want to jump in and have something to say, at the bottom of your screen there's an icon that you can put your hand up. I'm just going to make Sabrina a co-host. See if it works this week, Sabrina. There you go. Let's see. Okay. Annie, you're amazing. Okay, let me tell you, it's 5:00 in the morning for Annie. Just amazing. So thank you so much for rocking up and coming along. Thank you for joining us, Emma and Sue. The way this works is before I start is just there's a bit of a chat, and if you want to join in the conversation towards the end, then you need to request to speak and I'll bring you in. So I'm going to take a deep breath because I do record this and we crack on as if we're starting from fresh. So good evening, everyone. It's Library Staff Love Learning Twitter Spaces. This evening, my co-hosts, Ruth Maloney and Sabrina Cox and myself, are discussing reading. Now, I love this subject. Librarians themselves love this subject. But over the last few weeks, Claire Brumpton, who is one of our guest speakers, and I wrote an article about reading. And while we were busy creating it, Claire wrote down something that was along the lines of, it's not called reading for pleasure, it's called reading for recreation. And it just really sort of started the cogs. The great thing about writing an article with somebody else is that they make you think about something in a different way. So along those lines, we then wrote this article that is actually called School Libraries and Reading Development. And I hope that you'll be inspired after this wonderful conversation this evening to go along and read it. We're trying to help teachers understand the role of the school librarian in beyond that recreational reading. So we're going to be talking tonight about reading for learning, and we're actually going to be talking about reading for life and how school librarians can actually support the education and curriculum in our schools. So without further ado, I'm going to say a quick hello to my two co-hosts. So Ruth, hi, have you had a good week?
Yeah, not bad so far. Last one, dragging ourselves towards the holidays, so we'll be glad when it arrives. Open days and things this week, so that's the big hurdle to get over. So this is a nice way to start, feel a bit in touch with the profession and not just with school.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Sabrina, are you well? Are you with us?
Yeah, here, raring to go, slightly hyper.
Your voice sounds a bit better this week.
Yeah, it goes when I talk too much, so I'll try not to do that.
Okay, that's great. Right, so let's kick off with going back to what we're thinking about when we're talking about reading. Can I bring Claire in, because I've already mentioned her? Claire, just introduce yourself a little bit, and can you start us off by talking about what you think about recreational reading and why you suggested when we were talking about it that you should call it that?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Claire Brumpton, and I've worked in school libraries for nearly 25 years now. I'm currently the librarian at the International School of London, and I've always worked in school libraries in the UK. But I've been working at ISL now for about 8 years, actually. So yeah, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk about this as well. I mean, as Elizabeth has already said, we've been writing some articles together, and it is really good to write articles with other people because you do start thinking about things and just talking about things in different ways. And I started thinking about the whole reading for pleasure, the topic of reading for pleasure, and why it sometimes sits a little bit uncomfortably with me. And really, I think it's because over the past 20 plus years, I've come across so many students who are not natural readers. They don't come to me as enthusiastic readers. And while I've always looked upon that as a bit of a challenge, because obviously I feel that one of my roles in any school environment is to enthuse students about reading, but so much in schools is around reading for pleasure. And what about those students that don't find it pleasurable? You know, what do they get out of it? And do they come to the library lesson or to English lessons or anywhere where reading is expected of them and immediately feel excluded? So the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, what you really need to do is to get students into reading by focusing on them, on their interests. It starts with them. It starts with what they're keen on and what they already have knowledge of. And so really that was the starting point of my thought about this. And then I thought, well, it's about recreational reading, isn't it? It's about whatever the student is interested in. So when you're having a one-to-one conversation with a student where you're trying to find them a book, it's about having that conversation of, oh, you're interested in dinosaurs or space or coding or whatever it might be. Let's see if we can find something about that. So instead of approaching it from the reading perspective, you're approaching it from the thing that interests them, from that perspective instead.
Absolutely. And I think that's what really interested me about this thought process, was the fact that we do. I have, when I did work in the school, was definitely very conscious of the fact that we were sort of looking at what the students' hobbies were and likes and dislikes. But this for me feels just slightly different. It feels like there's an opportunity, or a bigger opportunity, to hook students in a way that you're not insisting that they read for pleasure.
Yes.
And that they have to enjoy it. It's about, like you say, finding that book that is maybe about, I don't know, the Arctic, because they're interested in snowmen and do you know, sort of those kind of snowmen? What a stupid thing to say. I meant, what do you get? What are the bears? Polar bears. That would have been a better thing to say. You can tell this is live, can't you? But yeah, it's about the fact that you've managed, there is a book on your library shelf, or there's a website in your armory of resources that you can hopefully guide them to in order to be able to get them to read something. And that's what this is all about, isn't it?
Yes, I think so, and I think sometimes it's the idea or thought of reading that might put a student off. So if you approach it from the other end, from the topic, from the thing that they love, from the thing they feel passionate about, the reading becomes the incidental part of it. So you're still getting the students to read, but it's almost that reverse psychology. I'm not going to ask you to read. I'm going to ask you what you're interested in, and then I'm going to find something that interests you. So I think, a little bit of it maybe is just a little bit of psychology and playing on words, but it does feel, as you say, that little bit different to you are going to read and you are going to enjoy it, because, I can't take that for granted with each of my students.
Absolutely. And it's about being there for everybody, isn't it?
It is
really, fast-paced kids that really want to devour every book that you've got on your shelves, and you can't get enough books in for them, right down to those students that struggle. And we have a job to, part of the role is to make sure that you are servicing for everybody, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and also I think those students who already love reading, with most of my job is already done with them before they even come into the library, because they will find they'll find their own way there.
Yeah,
and they already know what they like. Maybe I can extend it. Maybe I can introduce them to a new author or a new genre, or I can extend what they already do. But in terms of the more reluctant readers, or those who will just say quite be quite open and say, I just don't like reading, it's not for me, I can say to them, great, you've set me a challenge, but at the same time, I have to respect the fact that they might never be a reader. But if I can get them reading something along the way without being too resistant to it by getting in via a different direction, then it's worth doing. And I think in some ways that's one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the most enjoyable parts of the job, when you do find something that a reluctant reader will read.
Absolutely. Oh, I was just muting myself. That wasn't very clever, was it? I would just want to bring Gaurav in, because he's coming from a completely different perspective, and I love it when we manage to get somebody who's not a librarian onto one of these chats. So Gaurav, can you just please introduce yourself first, and then I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, no worries. I'm Gaurav Dubey. I am first and foremost an English teacher in a secondary school, but I'm also the head of English because I like to punish myself. And I also lead English across my foundation as well. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the conversation. Some of the things that Claire has said so far really got me thinking a lot about how reading for pleasure, reading for recreation is kind of viewed. So thanks for having me. Twitter space.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm delighted that you're with us. So as far as you as an English teacher are concerned, obviously I would imagine you have got set texts that students need to read. Do you have a role where you, and I'm really going off topic slightly, but do you have regular reading lessons in your school? So is there a drop it and read 15 minutes, or a time when some of your students have to go to the library? Is there anything like that in your school at the moment, Gaurav?
The answer to that is yes. We do have those kind of opportunities to go to the library. The library actually in our school is the most visited space in the school. We have 700 children visiting the library every day. So I think that's a big sort of success.
Wow, busy library.
Yes, very busy library. But you know, it's not just during lesson times, it's during those social times as well. You know, at break time and at lunchtime. And I think those kind of parts of the day are sort of taken for granted, because it becomes a social place for children to sort of talk about books and just have a conversation about some of the books that they're reading. You know, and I think that's an opportunity that's you know, often missed. But also at Key Stage 3, we have a reading lesson each week, which we have in our reading room, which is a book with beanbags, a place where children just get to read and to sort of chill, I guess, is the best way to talk, best way to explain it. But it always has the opportunity for book talk. So we always build in those sort of 15, 20 minutes where we just talk about the books that we're reading and recommend different books. And I honestly think that's far greater than any intervention that I've ever put in place to try and force children to read.
Absolutely, and I would so agree with you. I think it is. I'm sure I've read somewhere, maybe somebody can remind me of what it was, but somewhere I read that even a school that has that where children are surrounded by books, it's almost like osmosis that they are tempted to pick them up and flick through them. And actually, that's what part of what we're providing as a school library. You know, giving children the access to the books and therefore access to that ability to be able to chat about what they've been reading. I think some of the best conversations I've ever had about reading is usually about a book that I really hated or disliked. and at the end, realizing that because I've discussed it, I've actually enjoyed it more than I thought I did. And that's what book talks can actually do for you. And I'm sure that that's what they do for children as well.
Absolutely. I actually think that book talk can become a really heated, you can end up having some very heated discussions. So we had one student who'd read Of Mice and Men, and you know, there's a lot of controversy around Of Mice and Men, in you know, in the current climate, and he absolutely loved it and really, really enjoyed it. And another student really got quite angry when they read that particular book. That anger really opened up a lot of conversation about language and the power of language, and it was so much more than just about the book. It was about experiences that they've you know, had to deal with, and the children almost having to empathize and feel that sort of pathos for each other. So you know, for me, I think it's really, really important beyond just the book, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, what a great point. I'm going to just bring Ruth in at the minute. Ruth, have you got, what do you think about recreational reading as opposed to reading for pleasure?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. We do, our year sevens have a compulsory, well, it's slightly complicated, but one of their 6 English lessons is a reading lesson every fortnight. And they come in and they're working through what we call a reading challenge. But with our students, we do have non-readers or reluctant readers, but by and large, they're quite a, you know, literary bunch. But what I say to them is I'm always trying to expand their reading and trying to encourage them to read different things. So the challenge encompasses everything from graphic novels to newspapers to websites to collections of poetry. And I say to them, even if you think you're an amazing reader, you know, there will be things out there that aren't your cup of tea, and it's about expanding. And I kind of use that approach to hopefully draw in the people who think that they're not readers, but who might discover that actually the thing they do every day, which is read the newspaper on the train into school, still counts as reading for me. So it's the same sort of thing, I suppose, that Claire's thinking about and talking about. It's just a slightly different approach to it because of the kind of students we have. We do have ones who say, I don't read, I'm not a reader, but not very many. And I entirely agree. The best with Gaurav, that the best I think the best way to encourage the kids to read is for them to talk about what they're reading and what they like and what they didn't like. And I love those conversations, and they're always the brilliant start of year 7, or a change of group in year 9 when they're in a different group of people and they can share new, they can learn about new people. Far, far better. I mean, some kids love to come and ask for a recommendation, but I love to hear them recommend. And I love it when they talk about something that I really didn't enjoy. All the teenage murder stuff they're reading at the moment, I just can't get on with it. And I'm very happy to say, I think I'm too old for that. And that's brilliant. Great conversations.
I think it's so true. I think definitely peer-to-peer reviews are the best, without a doubt. I'm just going to bring Sabrina back in. What's it like in your school? Is it the same? Do you have, what is reading like? Give us an overview.
It's very much like Ruth was saying, actually. I've got obviously the readers that I don't need to do anything with, and I just keep throwing new books at them and they just lap them up. And then I've got the ones right down the other end who like hate reading and won't touch a book. So this year I've been pushing that, like exactly what Ruth was saying, that you don't have to read a book to be reading. You can read a newspaper, you can read the web, you can read blogs, you can read graphic novels, you can read comics, and just expanding what's out there that classes as reading. And I am using the reading for pleasure and interest at the moment, but I have to say I do like this word recreation. That sounds pretty cool. And I do want to encourage book talk in my classes, but I seem to be faced with groups of students who are almost terrified to express an opinion. So I'm working on that first to then bring in the book talk. But yeah, it's very similar.
That's so interesting, though, because I think that we do have a lot of students who aren't willing to express an opinion. It's a bit like when I was teaching inquiry, and we would read something and you'd ask them how they felt about something, and just shocked faces that they actually had to think how they felt. Do you know, why would they feel anything? And it's a skill that they have to learn. So actually being able to understand that you can have an opinion about something, and it doesn't matter that it's not the same as the person sitting next to you, it's all right. And yeah, it's interesting, Sabrina, that you've sort of hit on something that your students actually need nurturing. And if you can give them that, what a great step forward, to make them confident about speaking their opinions about a book that they've read is quite a safe environment to be having an opinion on something. I think is a great starting point. So I just want to go on, because we've done recreational reading. I just want to go on to reading for learning. So reading for learning is particularly something that I love as a school librarian. All right. I have to admit, I'm not currently a school librarian. I'm a trainer. But when I worked in school libraries, and when I train teachers and school librarians about what we're trying to do, I definitely think that reading for learning is a big thing that school librarians need to be part of. But what does that actually mean? And I think actually there's a crossover between what we've been talking about, recreational reading, and reading for learning. So reading for learning initially to me means reading for the curriculum, reading for your subject knowledge, reading to understand the information that you are getting and acquiring. But actually we've sort of touched on the fact that recreational reading can also be newspapers and different things that actually, that's reading for learning. So recreational reading and reading for learning can be the same thing depending on what they read. Gaurav, do you, within your subject, obviously there is a lot of reading for learning. How do you encourage your students to to think deeper. So do that. What we were just saying is the fact that students don't like to voice an opinion. Do you find that is part of the problem with your students, or do you think that, is it something more or something less than that?
It's definitely a problem. Having students being able to voice opinions. I mean, there are some students who are more capable than others, but really we have to, in the classroom setting, give our students sentence starters and really model for them how they can give an opinion. And I gave a talk recently in Manchester about this sort of very issue, that our children come from backgrounds where they're not allowed to have an opinion at home. To the point where their future husbands or their future wives will be decided for them, sort of thing. And actually that being able to have an opinion and being able to voice an opinion about a book or what they're learning in the classroom, for that matter, is a really, really important one for us. And it's a role that obviously we play in the classroom that we have to think about, and what our librarians do in terms of the book groups, etc., that they put on. But for us, yes, we have to really model it really quite explicitly for how you talk about and how you have an opinion. But 99% of the students that we have will be able to, as they go through school, be able to form an opinion based on what they're on what they're reading, and also to use wider reading, like stuff from the British Library and things like that, to help inform their understanding of texts as well. So it's a really good question, but I think people often think that our children are very sort of confident in giving their opinions and their views, but actually they're not. They're good at giving the opinions and views of their parents or of other adults around them, and actually that reading connects so closely with that sort of social aspect of talking and being able to talk, and I think that's the importance of reading for recreation. Recreation is both isolated, something you do in isolation, but also something you do socially, and it's the same with reading for learning as well. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I just muted myself again. I'm having a problem with my mute button. I think it's a really fascinating thing that actually reading for learning, reading for recreation can bring out something that allows our children, our students, to voice opinions in a safe environment. And I think, school libraries provide that opportunity where maybe you're not in a classroom, where you're sometimes in a classroom setting, there is that peer pressure that actually you're going to I can remember as a child myself, it wasn't that I didn't know the answer or I didn't have an opinion. I didn't want to voice my opinion because I was scared what the other students would think of me, or think that what I was saying was stupid or daft and laugh at me. And I think that's where our school libraries can come in, especially for those students, where you can nurture and give them those resources that they need, while giving them a platform to be able to say what they think. I think we're almost sounds to me like there's another Twitter Spaces chat all just on that, I think. Can I bring Claire back in? What do you think about reading for learning and what we've been talking about? Like, obviously we're talking about the fact that students need to be empowered to be able to voice an opinion, but does reading for learning have something more that we need to give?
I think it does, yeah. But I also think going back to the issue of voicing opinions, that is a real problem it's something that I've seen over the years in some schools and some school settings more than others. The experience I've got at the moment is that the school I'm in right now, it's an IB school, and the IB very much is the way that it's delivered. It's very student led, so children, even the youngest at 3, are expected to have opinions on things. So that's very much the environment that the students are in, and it's very much the environment that they're encouraged to speak up in classrooms, in the playground, in the library, sort of everywhere. But one of the issues with voicing opinions that I found is we have a huge multilingual and multicultural uh, cohort of students. I mean, at any one time, we've got 40 or 50 countries represented within the school, just within the student population, plus that of the staff. Obviously, many of our students are multilingual, but many of them are not yet confident in English. So we've got this joint problem of not knowing when a student isn't able or that seems reluctant to voice an opinion, whether it's because they don't feel comfortable voicing an opinion for cultural reasons, or whether it's because they don't have the words.
Absolutely. I think, as we become more multicultural, with people coming into the country, I think, we have to be more aware of that, don't we? Can I bring Ruth back in?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying about voicing opinions, and the kind of, it's not really the counter argument to that, but one of the things that I'm very bound up with in our school is trying to encourage the students to think for themselves before they voice their opinion. And I have up in the library and on the screens around school a Fran Lebowitz quote, which is "Think before you speak and read before you think," because I am wholehearted. I mean, I hold the world in horror when I hear students get on a bandwagon, usually in our school about J.K. Rowling or similar, and whether those people ought to be allowed to speak ever again. And it's that, while I very, very much want them to have an opinion, I want our students to have a considered opinion, and I want it to be their opinion. And it was what Gaurav said about it's very easy for them to voice the opinions of adults around them, or the Twitter sphere, or whatever TikTok has its opinion about. But what I think is really important, and what we can do, is encourage them to have opinions of their own that they have carefully considered. And I think one of the ways I try and do that is by buying what might appear to be quite controversial books, so that they are in the library and they open a conversation, I think. And that's in my world, that's reading for learning, reading and really thinking about what it is and what your opinion is about what you've read.
I think that's such an important thing, and I think, Ruth, you need to share that quote with us on Twitter. So make sure you use the hashtag.
I will. I'll find it. Yeah.
I think we'll all be looking for that afterwards. I just want to pause there a second. If anybody is listening and they feel as if they would like to join in this conversation, we're going to move on to Reading for Life. But if you'd like to join in the conversation at any point and you're on your phone, just request to speak, and I will bring you in and invite you to say whatever you're thinking. You are very, very welcome to just sit and listen, but to come and join us is an opportunity as well. So I'm going to pause a second and change the conversation, because once again I'm going to bring Claire back into this, because writing this article, she again mentioned Reading for Life, and I was like, okay, so we're talking about, the newspapers and reading the whatever it is on the back of the cereal packet and those kind of things. And actually she changed it, the way that I think about Reading for Life, and came up within the article, so you can reread it at some point, or read it for the first time at some point. But she came up with a really good example of a lesson that she taught with students who were reluctant, and it was the hook of Reading for Life. I wonder if, Claire, if you could come back in and just talk about what you were doing with these students.
Yes, of course. So this was actually many years ago in a different school, in a very, very different context. It was quite a challenging environment, and we had a lot of non-readers in the school, and I happened to have quite a good relationship with a lot of the students, so they would speak to me, and they would, tell me what they didn't like or what they couldn't do, or but I getting them to read was something that I didn't think was ever really going to happen. I did have some breakthroughs with some students, some individual students, but for the classes that would come in and were battling through trying to read, many of them had quite low literacy levels as well, and I think that had quite a big bearing on their perceptions of reading, and also came from families where there were low levels of literacy. So I just got talking to them, and much of this actually came out of a conversation with the students, which is sometimes where I get my best ideas. I'm going to say they do sort of inspire me sort of mid-conversation. And I just got talking to them about what they thought they might need in their future. And it sort of the conversation sort of went on, and it actually developed into a series of lessons where we talked about what sort of reading and what sort of literacy they were going to need in their future. So it might be things like how to fill in a form. If they needed to claim child benefit in the future, they probably were going to have to fill in a form to be able to claim it. Or if they were going to be claiming tax credits, or if they needed, if they're on a tight budget and they really needed to plan their meals for the week. They'd need to read. Maybe they'd need to read some recipe books if they needed to sort of develop some new ideas of meals to cook, or these are the ingredients I've got. What can I do with them? Or if they wanted to learn to drive, they were going to have to do the theory test of the highway code. So they were going to have to read the highway code in some shape or form, and understand it enough to be able to answer the theory questions. So it was all of those sorts of things. It was the practical day-to-day reading, which was nothing to do with curling up in a corner with a book, and it was more to do with, at some point in your life, you're going to need to use these reading skills to be able to just get through the day. And that's really that was the inspiration for it. And so we spent a series of lessons where we were looking at things like the highway code, and where we were looking at things like writing a meal plan for a week, and using drawing on recipe books, ideas from recipe books, or maybe going on supermarket websites to price things up. And it was all of those sorts of things, and it was actually really successful, and it did get the students to understand that reading was something that was for them, but maybe not in the conventional ways that we would have, certainly that I would have thought of before. And it gave them a sort of it gave them an in to reading, just for practical purposes. So maybe maybe they were never going to curl up with a book, but they were able to read enough to be able to do the things that they were going to need to do as adults.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the thing, isn't it? We are trying to bring through our schools students who are literate. If you leave school without being able to read, without being able to read, you are at a real serious loss. You're not as in a great position as somebody who can read. So if we can do absolutely anything that we can in order to help those students in any way that we can, it's a step forward. And I was just, what a great idea, Claire. I sat there when we discussed it. I sat there thinking, why didn't I ever think of that? It's like, and I can visualize some of the students that learned reading the highway code and practicing those would have been a winner. So I hope anybody who's listening who has got those really difficult students who aren't reading anything in any way, shape or form, those kind of things are really, really important, and are easy wins. Our students are wanting to go on holiday. They need to get onto the website. They need to read their destinations. They need to read where they're going, how long their plane is going to take to get there. Do they need to get a bus on the other end? How are they going to get to the hotel? What does the hotel have? It's just such a simple but genuinely great idea, Claire. I love it. I'm going to go. So again, just put it out there. If anybody does want to join in, just click that request to speak. I'm going to move on to how do we keep our reading lessons fresh? So we've talked about recreational reading and how we can do those one-off lessons. We can have those students in the library. But is there any other ideas that if you have your students in the library once a week, what is it that we do in order to, is it enough just to give them 20 minutes quiet reading and 10 minutes to change a book? Or does it have to be more than that? Sabrina, can I bring you in there?
Okay.
throw that one at you. What do you think?
Thanks so much. It's really interesting because we've just moved away from the half an hour reading, half an hour comprehension work, because we just found we were battling with students who couldn't read for 20 minutes. They couldn't manage 2 minutes, let alone 20. So I've moved away from that for now. And I'm just encouraging interest in like literature and language and pop culture, as well as doing the research and the digital literacy side of things. So today I exposed my year 7s to The Raven, and me and the teacher, we read the whole poem out between us together, and they followed a copy along in front of them. And I had a list of things up for them to listen out for as we read it. And then I showed them the Simpsons adaptation of it, which, they were so excited about that. It was brilliant. And for me at the moment, it's just a case of sparking interest in all sorts of language-based texts, whether that's fiction or non-fiction at the moment.
Absolutely. It is important to keep, changing it up to do so, especially if you have them on a weekly basis. It certainly needs to be... you want to keep them on their toes. You want to just give them something else. Ruth, what about you? What do you do to keep your reading lessons fresh? Do you have reading lessons?
Yeah, we do. And I feel really slightly uncomfortable in saying that we are fortunate to have the kind of kids, or unfortunate to have the kind of kids who just sit and read mostly for an hour. And I say to the staff that they have to come in and they have to read as well for that hour, which is actually, funnily enough, more difficult because the staff want to be marking or doing something else. But I say to them, it's all about modelling. And so we do, they by and large, they sit and read. They're only fortnightly. But we then, they're broken up with a bit of talk, a bit of general sharing, who's reading what, and they're working on their reading challenges. So every now and then they will need the laptop because the reading challenge is based on a OneNote book, and they have to answer various questions, or they have to record a video, or whatever it is that the challenge is to do. So we don't have that kind of, it's just a very particular.
You're just lucky, Ruth. Yeah,
I'm afraid I am. Well, I think it's lucky. Yeah, although it isn't very challenging in that way. The challenge is, I can pretty much find something for the kids to read. The most challenging ones are the ones who only want to read graphic novels. Well, that's still fine by me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gaurav, can I bring you back in? Do your students have regular reading lessons like we've been talking about, or not?
Yes, I do. But one of the things that our reading lessons are not, they're not about quiet. They're not really about silence. They are deliberately a social experience, because that's what our students, in my context, they need that opportunity to talk. So it's not about changing books either. It's for us, it's more about agency and giving students the opportunities to choose books that they're interested in. I'm with everybody here. That it's got to be about the books that they're interested in. It's got to be about something that's going to hook them. I don't care about the reading ages so much as I do about the fact that they're having an enjoyable experience as they can. And if they're not, we don't always read books and find it enjoyable, but sometimes it's okay to be angry or feel a different emotion other than joy when you're reading.
So can I just ask, Gaurav, do they come along
Yeah.
to these sessions expecting to be stimulated, or do these conversations just happen by osmosis, or do you give them a hook? How do you start it off, or do they know that when they go for their reading lesson that this is the setup, this is how it works?
Well, they know, to be honest, to start off with, that there is like a specific sort of routine. So they will come in to our reading room, and they will begin reading in silence, and that's when the teacher sort of radiates. And the purpose of the radiating is not to is for the teacher to talk to particular students about the books that they're reading, and then the teacher will look at what's there, the commonality, and use that to spark the discussion, to spark the conversation about books. It's a very sort of organic experience as well. And I forgot to mention, actually, we make sure that we buy new books, about 3 or 4 new books every month, and those part of my teacher CPD is to read those books and to then share what they enjoyed, what they hated about the book, and that sort of thing. And it is a mixture of graphic novels, fiction, non-fiction, picture books. Our kids adore picture books, and so do I, to be fair. So
absolutely. I think picture books have a real role to play for older students. Some of my best sessions were when we were looking at the Greenaway Book Award with teenagers and trying to get them to understand that actually a picture book, even if it's for a young child, needs to be engaging for a parent who's the person that's going to be reading it to that child. You know what it's like? I've got a 18-month-old grandson who actually likes to read the same book 20 times. Well, it's great. It's bad enough reading it 20 times anyway, but if it was a really boring book, it would be even worse. So it's fascinating reading picture books with older students, because they certainly get a lot more out of it than you would expect them to, I think. Ruth, can I bring you back in?
Yeah, just thinking about picture books. One of the really interesting things that we often talk about is writing about a particular topic for that audience. So one of the ones that was nominated for the Greenaway last year or the year before was No Money Day, about a child whose mother goes to the food bank and there isn't any, goes to the cupboards, no food in the cupboard. And they're really, really interesting conversations about how do you write that kind of content for that age of child and make it appropriate. And things like, that leads on to books about the war, John Boyne's Boy in the Striped Pajamas. How do you write that age appropriate material? Those are really, really interesting conversations. Actually, more interesting for me, I think, than whether you liked or disliked the book, but what is it about those books? And brilliant with picture books, because they're so sparse. And when they rhyme as well, that's a double win, I think.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I love with books is that there's an activity where you can do what was the build up to the beginning of this story and what was happening. And when a book finishes, it doesn't always finish neatly, does it? Books sometimes leave you with okay, is there another one in the series coming? So a great lesson is talking to students about, okay, so what do we think is going to happen next? If you were going to write the beginning of the next chapter book, the next book, where would it go? What would it start with? So books they can just offer so much, can't they? From the simplest of hooks to something that is really expansive and bring in such a lot of detail and information for our students. I think they're great. Thank you, Sabrina. Okay, so I think I have run through all of my questions this evening. So I'm going to bring it to a close. What I do need to say is that Library Staff Love Learning is run by myself and Ruth and Sabrina. We get together regularly to decide what our topics are going to be and how we are going to move it forward. If anybody is listening and wants to be more involved or can think of a topic that they really think that we should talk about, then please get in touch. We're more than happy to take advice from people. The other thing is that I run a membership for schools and teachers to learn how to integrate your school library into the curriculum. It's something that I'm really passionate about. I think it's really important, and conversations with teachers is hugely essential as our school libraries, begin to close because people don't understand what it is that they can do. So please get in touch if you want to know more about that. We are meeting again after half term on the 7th of November. I will let you know what's coming up when I know myself. We haven't quite decided yet. So I want to just finish this off with giving my speakers and my co-hosts an opportunity to say one last thing. What is it about recreational reading, reading for learning, or reading for life that your school libraries bring to the educational process of your school? Big question, but do you have a final thing to say? Let's start with Claire.
I think one of the things that I would say is one of my passions, I suppose, in my role, is just bringing new literature to students. I've worked with so many teachers over the years who are, they're really passionate about reading and really keen to get their kids reading in school, but that knowledge of recently published literature and trends in literature, it's something that I feel I really I try my hardest to keep up with myself. It's sometimes easier said than done, but I do think that is one of the roles that a librarian can bring really effectively to a school and to the benefit of everybody, both staff and students. I think the number of staff that have come to me and said, thank you for giving me an alternative to something I've been using for the last 15 years. And students love it. And also trying to involve them in the choice of literature. So I've always got a suggestion box. I've always got different ways of students to recommend new books to me, because there are things that they know about that I've got no idea about, and they know what's trending and I don't. And, so I try and involve them as well. They're my two sort of things that I love doing in terms of reading more than anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was great. And thank you for joining us this evening. Gaurav,
thank you for having me.
Can I bring you in, Gaurav, for one last final thing?
Sure, yeah. I think I'm actually going to say what librarians offer staff. I think, speaking as a teacher, they're an invaluable resource for us. And I've said it before, and I've written about it before, that their knowledge, their expertise is something that schools desperately need right now, probably more than any other time. And when we're talking about reading for recreation or learning or for life, that this is what our librarians offer our schools and offer us, and offer our staff. And at a time when things are looking a bit sort of rotten in the world, we need that expertise, and we need school libraries to not close. Actually, we need more of them, just so that children are given that opportunity, teachers are given that opportunity to really think about the importance of reading and really having that skill set outside of school as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for being such a supporter. It's we met on a podcast that you run. Are you still doing that?
Yes, although I haven't done it for a while now.
Okay. It's amazing. If you manage to get somebody to do a favour for you, you always get them back. So thank you for doing that this evening for me, Gaurav. It was much appreciated.
No worries, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth and Sabrina, have you got any final words that you'd like to finish off with this evening, or are you happy to bow out?
No, I think I agree with what everyone else has said, really.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Snap.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening. If anybody wants to know anything more about what we do, ElizabethAHutchinson.com is my website. Get in touch, and we will see you after half term. Make sure you know, if you're getting through the week, that this week goes well for you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your time. Good evening. Oh, bye, Annie. You can go back to bed now. Take care. Bye.